EURAXESS Smart Talks for Talents, your personal guide to research careers, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Hi, I'm Daria, a senior expert of the EURAXESS National Contact Point in Latvia.
And I'm Jovan, a teaching and research assistant from Serbia, and you're listening to EURAXESS Smart Talks for Talents.
EURAXESS is a unique pan-European initiative of the European Research Area, providing information and assistance services to researchers regardless of their career stage.
Backed by European Commission in 43 European countries, it supports research mobility and career development while enhancing scientific collaboration between Europe and the world.
The title of today's episode is Tips and Perspectives on the Gender Gap in Academia. This is the first part of a two-part episode. According to the Commission's communication, in 2021, ERA noted that women remain significantly underrepresented within Europe's research community, making up just 33.4% of researchers, 24% of professors, and 26% of university leaders.
However, Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer of Facebook, said in the future there will be no female leaders, there will just be leaders. What is the current situation in the academic world? Let us start smart and explore this topic together.
Our first guest is Ms. Oriana Bertucci, who is an active participant in the EURAXESS Hubs project. The project focuses on three thematic areas: talent management in academia, a research career outside academia, and scientific startup entrepreneurship. Oriana is involved in an activity that places a special focus on gender.
Ms. Bertucci is also a research and development project manager at the University of Liège with 15 years of experience as a higher education professional. Oriana works on the University of Liège's strategic plan focusing on career and leadership development for researchers. She offers guidance to Ph.D. candidates and postdoctoral fellows through workshop facilitation and training modules. She has experience in academic career development in Canada, the United States, and now Europe.
Oriana, thank you very much for joining us. The Academia Hub in the EURAXESS Hubs pilot focuses on talent management in academia, with a focus on gender. Why is it important for EURAXESS to focus on the area of gender?
Thank you for having me today. Well, research tells us that while female enrollment in higher education has tripled or nearly tripled since 1995, there's still a huge gender gap when it comes to equal outcomes. When it comes to leadership and academic positions, when it comes to pay, research and publications. And so I think it's important for EURAXESS to focus on this area of gender while recognizing and understanding the local context in which we work. We need to be able to critically evaluate where we are in our institutions or in our communities. And then we need to see how we can develop and improve the working conditions for those that we are supporting, for those that are in our institutions. One of the benefits of EURAXESS and one of the reasons this hub is so important is that we really are aiming to benefit from the experiences and the expertise of different countries and different institutional practices. But when you're in your institution, when you're at the local level and you're on the ground, it can be really hard to know where to start. And it can be hard to start from nothing. So having these resources all in one place, benefiting from the experts, the initiatives that exist at the European level and across Europe, assures the support that is needed at the local level. And so I think we need to address these attitudes, address these questions, and we need to find a way to better support those in our communities at the local level and benefit from the European level and the access to the resources.
As far as I know and understand, you do a lot of mentoring for young researchers in particular in a local community at your university. Have you or one of your female mentees felt gender bias in developing their careers? If the answer is yes, how was this handled?
Yeah, well, like I said, using the example of a female researcher who's looking to apply for a large funding grant, the question always comes up if they've had children: how do I address this in my CV? Is this considered a gap? And so I think those are important questions that each female researcher needs to address individually and then even collectively. So finding support among female researchers for those perhaps who have been successful in a funding call to say, here's how I addressed it. Each discipline, each field is a little bit different. And so learning and benefiting from the experience of others. I think the other thing that's important to consider in this is that each institution, each country, each community has a different local context. And so when we talk about individuals who have experienced that bias, maybe it's being passed up for a promotion, maybe it's being passed up for a conference, maybe, there's a variety of different scenarios that can exist. It's understanding, okay, what do we learn from that? Is that something inherent in the environment and in the culture that we're in? Or is that maybe, is that just a one-off? Is it something that we can do something to change? Do we need to be more visible? Often female researchers, I do a lot of coaching, so preparing them for interviews or for grant applications. And they will say, I don't always feel comfortable talking about myself. I don't want to, I don't want to brag. But sometimes it's actually very important to understand what our strengths are, to be able to talk about what we have accomplished and be able to create some visibility. I think often researchers are very good about talking about and giving visibility to their research, but not necessarily to the process that has allowed them to be a successful researcher. And so one of the things of my job is to support these researchers, and specifically female researchers in these experiences, but also to connect them to other groups of women, of successful researchers, because it's important that as a community you feel supported, that you have people that you can go to, people who have had those experiences that you can learn from, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And I think when we look forward, when we see successful institutions and successful communities, one of the strengths is that they have strong mentorship programs. They have strong units of collaboration. They have a way for female researchers to gather regularly, to have a safe space where they can talk about the challenges that they have faced, and they can rely on each other.
We all are different, some people are very shy, or some people don't know how to provide this information, but it is really useful to share.
And generally, as a researcher, is to think about building your own identity and your own brand. So if there's a social media platform, for example, that you use, perhaps in your field, it's Twitter, perhaps it's LinkedIn, whatever, ResearchGate, whatever it is in your discipline where there is a lot of discussion, a lot of visibility, I think it's very important to think about the brand, who you are, and what you put out there. So not just about your research, but also about the other aspects that interest you. So maybe you are in environmental law, but you have a passion for urban gardening. And so while that might be a little bit related to the policies of environmental law, you can bring in your enthusiasm and your interest in urban gardening, demonstrating that you are this well-rounded, holistic, interesting person. And so I think that understanding who you are, being able to have a brand, being comfortable with that brand, and sharing that is an important quality in research in the short and in the long term.
Please tell me, I'm very eager to know, actually, if the woman researcher comes to you and asks, how should I put, if I have children, if I've been raising many children or just one, or I'm planning actually to have a child, what is your tip for her to raise this question, or just skip it during the interview?
Wait to see if it's a question. And so sometimes, somebody will say, oh, I see a gap in your CV. How would, what happened, or what were you doing? And what I often like to encourage them to think about is that a lot of female researchers continue to do research even while they're raising children. So they're never really fully off.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
right? And so it's important to highlight that, look, I'm multitasked. I still had publications while raising my children. So when you think about a promotion, you think about a female researcher to head up a large research unit, you know they can multitask. You know there's still going to be an effective and accomplished researcher. And so I think it's really important for me to encourage them to see this as a positive and as a strength and not as a negative that, oh, I took time off, I took it away from my career. Because often, while it can be a lot to balance, it also can add a lot to them personally, which in turn makes them more motivated in their research to do well.
Yes, it is very important what you are telling, but sometimes it's so hard to make them share this information. We all are different, some people are very shy or some people don't know how to provide this information, but it is really useful to share.
But maybe the reason that we're shy to share is because we have created a culture where that is not talked about.
So, in addition to your career development experience in Europe, you have extensive experience in both Canada and the US. What are the main differences in gender equality? And
I think that's probably one of the biggest differences that I have seen. The way in which in academia there is a comfort level or an ease about talking about your family situation or what are the hiring practices in an institution. But I do think overall that there is an environment in North America where the conversation around gender equality when it comes to pay, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to hiring practices, it's really the norm now to have disclaimers on job postings. And so I think that culture of discussion and openness is much more prevalent and much more important.
so, overall, the situation is better there.
I think there's also a difference between having a formal course. So I know there are institutions that offer these as courses for credit. But
Yes,
this is
exactly.
also just an example of something that they would do as an extracurricular activity, right? So to be involved in a student organization, you participate in this training. And the young students do this on a voluntary basis to be involved. And so I think I'm sure that there are institutions in Europe that are doing this. I think my experience has just been it's not widespread. And if they're also offering these types of maybe volunteer or extracurricular trainings, it's later on in the university career, it's not as early. And so I think that for me, that's one of the big differences because having that conversation at 18 versus 28 or 38,
Yeah, of
the
course.
impact
When
is
you are
different.
a person that already is shaped for this kind of information.
In conclusion, what message can you share with our listeners?
Of course. So the first thing I would just say is speak up. Don't be afraid to speak up, to ask for the resources that you need, for the funding that you need. Do not be afraid to share the good things that you have done, your successes and your accomplishments. As a community, we want to celebrate that and we want to recognize that. And too often, I think female researchers do not advocate for themselves as not enough. The second thing is support other female researchers and support those in your community. If you have benefited from a certain experience, perhaps you are in a position to make decisions, to have an influence, support those who are coming after you. Pay it forward. Even if that road was hard for you, it's so important that we continue to pave the way so that others can benefit after we are gone. And then finally, don't be afraid to ask for something. For example, if you're interested in a topic and you want to speak at a conference, you want to be on a different committee within your institution. Maybe you want to participate in a EURAXESS network podcast, and you have an idea. Speak up and share and say, "I have some ideas. I'd like to contribute." Those would be my 3 maybe tips or suggestions.
Thank you, Oriana. That was really interesting, and you gave us a lot to think about. EURAXESS Smart Talks for Talents, your personal guide to research careers, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Now that we have a general picture of what's happening in the field, let's take a closer look at an especially interesting talent. Giovanna Debernardi is a talented researcher who chose to keep all options open. In parallel to obtaining a Ph.D. in international private law within the context of a joint Italy-France university program, she studied for certification as a judge.
Giovanna has taught civil law and contract law at the University of Nice, Sophia Antipolis, and is also the author and co-author of different French-Italian publications. In 2019, Giovanna was appointed as a civil judge, and she is now working at the Court of Termini Imerese Palermo.
So, Giovanna, Mrs. Giovanna, or should we call you Your Honor? We are happy to have you with us today. Let's start from the very beginning. Why did you choose to study international law?
Well, first of all, thanks to everyone for this opportunity to take part to your project. When I was a child, I had the opportunity to study in a French school. And the fact of studying in a French school helped me to grow up with a very, I can say, broad mind, which means that I had the opportunity to study with children that came to all the other parts of the world, which make me very interested in everything happen outside my town, outside my country. So that's why when I started the university and I decided to study law, I tried to specialize in everything which was international or European or comparative to the Italian law and the Italian legal system. And while I was writing my thesis, that was just to finish the university, so I wasn't still a PhD student. I was just a normal university student. But right there, I realized that I really liked it. And this is why once I finished the university, I tried to attend a PhD because my career was I finished my university, I've started a PhD, and while I was writing my PhD thesis, I prepared the exam to become a judge. So it was parallel.
Why? It's not a very common situation, you know?
No, it's not very common, but I decided to do everything at the same time because I told to myself that during my PhD, that's true that on one side, of course, I had to work for my PhD because I had to do researches. Sometimes also I had the opportunity to teach in some classes, but I had also other time, and I decided to spend the other times that I didn't use to write my PhD to study to become a judge because I had two big interests. On one side, the researches and the fact of teaching, but on the other side, also I was fascinated by the work of judging. And I was lucky because I tried to pass the judge exam at the end of my PhD. It was a sort of challenge because I like challenges.
That sounds very challenging, as you stated. There were a lot of challenges. In your opinion, what stands out as the biggest challenge you had to overcome in your career?
Well, the fact of becoming a judge during my PhD, to my mind, was my biggest challenge. Sometimes also you have the possibility to teach during your PhD career, and the fact of teaching is not something so evident.
There are certainly some benefits that came with that. So, did you get a chance to use the knowledge and skills you learned as a researcher afterwards in your career as a judge?
Yes, I think yes, because when you are a judge, first you have to write a decision, and when you when you prepare a PhD thesis, you have to write, and so you learn how to write, how to sum up also a reasoning. I think that the fact of having done a PhD and having taught in some classes during the PhD and after the PhD helped me during the hearings, because when you have 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 10 people in front of you for the hearings, is more or less like in a class. And here again, the fact of having done an experience as a professor at the university helped me to manage the hearings. So I
Sounds
think,
crazy.
yes, no, even because sometimes it's easier to manage a class of 10 students than a hearing with 10 parties.
So your tutors were women, as I understand,
Yes,
in France
they,
and
they,
in Italy.
they both were women.
Yeah. So that's why I have the next question. Have you or one of your colleagues ever experienced gender inequality, or have experienced good examples of gender equality, for example, at university or in your work as a judge?
Concerning my tutor, I can say that as regard my French tutor, I think that she experienced a gender equality, because while she was a professor, and I say a real professor at the university, she became a judge at the Supreme Court of France, the Cour de Cassation. And so she had a really brilliant career, both at the university and in the judicial system, and independently of the fact that she was a woman. So I think that in this type of person proves that you can have a brilliant career even if you are not a man, even if you're a woman. On the other side, my Italian tutors, I think that she experienced sometimes cases of gender inequality, because to my mind she was really brilliant. She's still a brilliant professor, but sometimes she was I don't like the name of discriminate, but I think that in some cases, especially for some research project, the fact of being a woman didn't help her so much to get some fund, to obtain some classes, some project in the University of Turin. So in the case of my tutor French, that there was a gender equality. In the case of my Italian tutor, there was, in some cases, hypothesis of gender inequality.
And what about you?
Probably I was lucky, because during all my period at the university, before as a university student, then as a PhD student, and then also as a PhD professor or contract professor, I didn't experience gender inequality. I worked with a lot of colleagues who were men, and I didn't have I hadn't the impression of being discriminated. Or the only thing that I noticed, and unfortunately it's not a problem that I notice only in my court or in my career, but in general, is that maybe at the same level, like for example at judges, there are more women than men, or also as professor, there are more professor women than professor men. But if you look at the key position, at the executive position, there are all men.
You are not talking about the situation in Italy, yes?
No, I'm talking about the situation in Italy. Yes, no, I'm talking in Italy, but in France, more or less is the same.
You said that your tutors, your mentors, had two different experiences concerning gender inequality. What do you think was the reason? Is it society? Are the laws to blame, different laws in each country? Or is it the local environment in which they are working? Is it the responsibility of the university itself and the local collective which works to them? or is it their personal responsibility to fight for their rights? What's the main issue that differs and that made it more difficult for your mentor in France to experience gender equality when compared to your mentor in Italy?
Whom to blame?
Who is to blame? Yes.
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 Excellent, Daria.
No, well, I think that the local influence was contributed to gender inequality on one side and gender equality on the other side. Independently of being a woman or a man, if I want to get a upper level of career, I have to work hard. So it's not a question of gender, but first of all, a question of merit, a question of how you work. It's a question of qualification, of competencies, of experience, not of gender.
In conclusion, when you see that there is a certain gender inequality in the workplace, from what you said and from what I understood, what message can you share with our listeners? Can you give us a tip for young researchers, young talents, tips for women in academia in general?
Well, maybe it can be evident, but I think, well, my first tip is to give to PhD students, especially women, but in general, PhD student, is to go ahead, even in sometimes you think that there are problems, that you will never get it. Just go ahead. You have to be very patient. You have to fight, because everything you want to get something, you have to fight. You have to believe in what you are doing. And as I also said during the career day organized by University of Turin in November, one thing that I really suggest is to keep open a lot of paths, a lot of doors, if I can say.
Wow, Giovanna, that was fascinating. Your career path was certainly different than the most and is an inspiration to us all. Thank you. This episode was prepared by hosts Daria Aksonova and Jovana Rangelovic, audio engineer Pavle Draškovic, outreach manager Dina Semeret, production manager Moria Riha, editors Isar Pir and Miroslav Trajanovic.
This episode is published under the Creative Commons CC BY license.
Until next time.